Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking a lot about sales. Grant's here with me. Hi, Grantley.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. So you've been talking a lot about sales of memberships being in crisis, and there are high turnover rates of membership consultants, low conversion rates, constant depletion of databases, issues like that. Can you dive a little deeper into those issues?
These days, a good example of membership sales that I've dealt with a lot is the fitness industry. So in the fitness industry, membership sales is sort of the bread and butter, and it's the thing I get most queries about. If I'm consulting to a company, often it's a problem in sales. In actual fact, usually it's actually not a problem in sales, but those are numbers that people can track, and they can see if it's working or not working. And a lot of times when I get called in to those situations, it's because they've got a problem. There's a crisis.
It's funny you say that, because before this episode, we're going through what we're going to say, and you're saying, we need to talk about problems in sales, and I'm looking at it and going like, but this isn't problems in sales, is it?
No, it's problems. It starts with people again, and I'm going to hammer on this a lot. It really is us not thinking about what we're putting people through. So if you think about sales, let's just pull back and go, okay, what's the sales experience? The sales experience is that salesperson wants to sell as many sales as they can to make their nut, and in some cases they do that by hook or by crook, and in some cases they do it efficaciously, and in some cases they just don't do it so well. But almost irregardless of that, what I'm going to talk about is how we can maybe shake that up a little bit. So one of the things, I'd come into clubs that are in crisis, and they'd ask me a question about, hey, we've got problems in sales, we're not converting as many people as we'd like, we're not getting the number of leads through we'd like, we're having a high turnover of our membership consultants, and all these problems are endemic. And when I really look at it closely, I think there's one thing that would help almost all those situations, and I call it sales rhythms. So we talk a lot about digital and analog, and if you look at a digital waveform is square, like it's got hard edges to it. And if you look at an analog waveform, it's beautiful curves. And I look at rhythms as being curves. And so what you're looking for from the sales experience is lots of soft edges, less friction points, less hard edges, and so this sales rhythms concept is pretty broad-reaching, but it really comes down to the sales cycle. So we think about the sales cycle as being a monthly thing, because we've got this fictitious line drawn in the sand, which is the end of the month, okay? And yes, we do our end-of-the-month numbers, and they're related to our balance sheet and to our profit and loss and all that sort of stuff. But in actual fact, what we're doing is forcing the sales team into that same cycle, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'll explain this in terms of, firstly, behavioural science. Okay, so behavioural science suggests that there's a thing called a fresh start phenomenon. And the fresh start phenomenon is where people have a turning point, and they're ready to engage in a habit or to change a habit or to do something new and try something new. So those fresh starts, and the best example is the New Year phenomenon, right? So we all know that in the New Year, a lot of people join health clubs, and their goal is to change habits, and their goal is to get healthy. We also know that 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, a lot of these people have dropped out. Regardless of that, what I'm talking about with the fresh start phenomenon is that they're starting because there's a line in the sand they've drawn, and that is next year I'm going to get healthy. That also happens on a monthly basis. It usually happens at the beginning of a month, not the end of a month. So therein there lies a little bit of a paradox. It also starts at the beginning of the week, and this is a really good example because we all know Monday is the busiest day in a health club. And so why are all these people turning up on Monday? Because they've had a big weekend, they're probably feeling not great, and as a function of that, sorry about that, they are thinking that I'm gonna have a fresh start, right? To use that descriptor. So what we do these closeouts as an industry generally. We do closeouts, and so at the end of the month we do this hard push where we drill deep into our database. So we've got people in our database, leads, and we hammer the phones. And oftentimes I've seen clubs where the MCs stay back, late. They get pizza, they treat it as fun and games. But for that MC, the end of the month becomes like their worst nightmare. Because they know those last couple of days of the month, if they're not at their number, they're going to be crushing their database. They're going to be hammering those phones. They're going to be having late nights, and they're going to come back I'm going to say on Monday, they're going to come back at the beginning of the month with almost nothing left in their database because they've really tried to, open it up.
And nothing left in the tank because they're literally going through 2 days of constant rejection. And whether you have a thick skin or not, we are human beings, and naturally we're not wired for rejection. And so even if we're not super aware of this, we should be, I think. But you're getting these people through really, it can't but beat them down.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And look, the best salespeople often have very thick skins, and they can put up with the rejection. The salespeople that don't have the thick skins struggle. They really do.
But you have such a high turnover rate. Isn't it 90 days in a lot of these? So that would indicate that the skin is not that thick overall, right, generally?
Well, it's not just about the thick skin. It's not just about the rejection that they're getting. What's happening in these situations is these people go through this cycle, and they know that the beginning of the month is going to be brutal because they've gutted their database. And so when you get those resignations, is almost always at the end of the month because they get through that last sales cycle and they say, I'm done with this. And they don't want to crawl back out of that hole next month. And look, a lot of clubs are suffering MC turnover at the rate of every 90 days. MCs are dropping off. Some are 6 months. Very few are hanging on to membership consultants for many years on end.
What was your retention of MCs at in Virginia?
So in the US, on the Atlantic coast, our retention of MCs was usually not less than 3 years, and we often had people staying, 8, 10 years.
Wow.
One of our MCs or several of them actually, are over their 20-year mark now. But it's because of this sales rhythm that I'm describing. Because what I'm describing, and I have an amendment to this, as in I've always been in favour of just strong, steady work in the sales area. And I've really railed against this closeout mentality, and I've in every club I've worked in, I've dropped it or diminished it down to not being this big deal that we make of it, because I want them to cherish their database and contact leads strategically, not because, we're not at our number at the end of the month, and therefore we need to hammer the phones until we get to that number at a high cost to their database. So what I'm really talking about is being rhythmic. The other piece of this is, coming back to the fresh start phenomenon, is the fact that Monday is the day we really should be on the phones. Monday is the day that we should be calling leads and going, hey, just wanted to follow up, see what you're thinking, if you've had any more thoughts about joining up. And what I know from, just look at the research in behavioural sciences, but what I know is that you'll make a lot more sales on that Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday because you booked the appointments than you would at the end of the month that you'd normally, put that push into. So what I'm really talking about is maybe 4 mini pushes. So I'm not talking about not getting on the phones and not having, some attempts to push a little harder than you might normally. And so how would I do that? Like what I would normally do is say, okay, we're going to do 10 hours on Monday, 8 on Tuesday, 8 on Wednesday, 8 on Thursday, and 6 on Friday. Okay, so there's your 40-hour week. Nothing's changed. Just means we put a few extra hours in on Monday because that's when the iron's hot. We hit it hard Tuesday and Wednesday. Come Thursday, Friday, we start to ease off. But with that sales rhythm, and I know that we have membership consultants working on weekends as well. I'm not dismissing that. We still have those people doing that. But what would make a lot of sense is do the walk-ins, get the sales you can, those people that can't come in during the week, tool them, sell them, but fill up your database for Mondays so that you can strike when the iron's hot. So that's sort of the basic summary of my premise of a more rhythmic sales process rather than this cataclysmic high at the end of the month, which could be a lot higher if it was the beginning of the month even. So, if you're not willing to try this strategically, maybe just try not doing the end of the month push, do the beginning of the month push. And the behavioral science will back up that as a much better strategy and will literally multiply the outcome that you're getting.
I love that. That's really powerful. In marketing too, what is coming to me is leveraging birthdays, for example.
Yeah, so obviously New Year's a great time. Birthdays are an amazing time. I'd probably leverage birthdays more for the leads you have in your database. So a lot of times we have leads and they go cold. They're still in our database, but we don't do much with them because we don't see it as much of an opportunity. But if you have birthdays in your lead database and you've got leads that went cold, might be a month or 2 or 3, since they were in, and their birthday comes around, that's a great time to send them an automated email or even put them on a phone call list and call them up on their birthday. Hey, just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Hope you're going well. If you've had any further thoughts about joining the club, let us know. But what a great time, because I know so many people, they get to their birthday and they're like turning 40 or they're turning 50 or even turning 30 and they go, oh my God, and it doesn't have to be a decade turnover. It could be they hit their 55 or 65 or whatever it is. Birthdays, you're right, are an amazing opportunity to help people at least get started.
Anything you have to say about MC hiring?
Yeah, so look, MCs are often hired out of desperation. And they're hired because we've lost somebody, we've got to refill that position urgently, and we tend to try and hire from within the ranks. And so we tend to hire, MCs that are experienced from other clubs. And, sometimes MC will jump from one club to the other because they think the grass is greener on the other side, and then they find out that it's much the same as the previous place they were. So the turnover continues. I think we need to put a lot of effort into hiring, particularly for membership consultants. Regardless of what industry you're in, those membership consultants are really the representative of your brand. So they're the person that is putting forth the image of the brand. And if that person's a high character, high emotional intelligence, great attitude and great personality, they're going to reflect beautifully on your brand. So those are the 4 essentials I talk about in the affinity principle about hire on attitude, character, emotional intelligence and personality, because they're the 4 things you can't change. They're the 4 things you can't teach. They're the 4 things that are that's pretty static when you're hiring somebody. You've got it or you don't.
What about them being passionate about the product they're selling?
Well, absolutely. And what I've seen, and this is something that it's endemic. So I've seen this in all sorts of different realms. But essentially, if you've got somebody that has achieved a life-changing, or they've had a life-changing event within the fitness industry, they're usually great MCs because they've lost a lot of weight, they've gotten fit, they've overcome some, challenges that they've faced through the fitness industry. They can be wonderful as MCs. But that passion for what they're doing, the passion to change lives, the passion to help people connect to movement, all those things are really good qualities to look for. So when we're looking for an MC, I firstly say try not to hire out of desperation. And that's easily said and not easily done sometimes. Equally, if we're taking care of our MCs and they are in that rhythmic pattern, we're going to get a lot less turnover. So we're looking for less MCs, hopefully. The other thing to think about when we're hiring MCs is don't just give them one interview. Don't just interview, the manager. Okay, I'm going to interview you. You tick most of the boxes. I'm going to hire you. Make it a little bit more challenging than that. And I don't mean challenging to make it difficult, but create some friction, literally, so that they do interview with maybe the manager. Maybe they interview with their peers. So the MCs get to interview them. And not even interview them. Just go for a coffee, but just get to meet them. Get somebody else who you trust their judgment to interview them. And I'd say particularly, and this relates to that, if they're recommended by a team member, so we talk about EMPS in the affinity operating system. So Affinity OS, we talk about EMPS. And EMPS is Employee Net Promoter Score. So that's essentially gauging how likely someone is to recommend someone to the company as a future team member. And what's beautiful about it is if that person's recommended them, they know what they're in for, they know who the company is, and they're going to divulge that, and they're going to give that person that sense of trust. That person may be working somewhere else. That person, usually is going to be a good fit for the company too, which is wonderful. So those team member referrals, I think, are the most powerful referrals of all, because it is almost that first sort of filter, and then the second filter might be the manager's interview, the third filter might be the peer interview or the peer, group meeting, and you might get to that point, and hopefully you'd have a pretty good idea of what's going on.
That's all really good advice. You've given us so many little things that seem little but so big all at the same time. And so I feel like if someone was to implement half the stuff you just gave, they would see a shift. Are there any final thoughts you have on this topic?
Just that we put so much emphasis on sales, and we put a lot of pressure on the salespeople themselves and the sales managers. And I do feel there's a lot of other pieces that dovetail into that. And so maybe next time we can talk a little bit more about how we feed quality sales into the sales process, and how we maybe help the salespeople beyond just giving that rhythm, we help them to have an easier time of it.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or feedback, you can reach out to us on social media or leave us a comment here. And we hope you can join us next time. Thank you.
Thanks.